The massive chamber stretched far above Ambassador Sarah Chen's head. Thousands of seats filled the circular hall, each one holding a different alien species. Some looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light. Others were covered in fur or scales. A few existed as glowing clouds of gas inside special suits. Sarah sat alone in the center of the room. The defendant's chair was designed to make whoever sat in it feel small and guilty. Today, it just made her angry. "The charges against the species known as humans are serious," announced the prosecutor. He was a Zephyrian, tall and thin with skin like polished silver. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's speakers. "They have broken our most sacred laws." Sarah watched as images appeared on the giant screens around the room. Pictures of human ships flying past warning beacons. Videos of human colonies built on worlds that were supposed to be empty. Reports of humans fighting back when other species tried to relocate them for their own safety. "The humans ignore our quarantine zones," the prosecutor continued. "They build wherever they want without asking permission. They refuse to follow the covenant of peaceful coexistence that has kept our galaxy safe for thousands of years." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sarah had heard these complaints before. The Galactic Council believed humans were too aggressive, too stubborn, too willing to fight instead of talking things through. "Worst of all," the prosecutor said, his voice rising with emotion, "they resist when we try to help them. When the crystalline hegemony offered to relocate human colonies to safer worlds, the humans attacked our ships. When the Aquatic Federation tried to teach them proper mining techniques, humans refused to listen. They are a danger to themselves and to all civilized species." Sarah almost smiled at that. The crystalline hegemony had wanted to move human colonies because the worlds contained valuable crystals. The Aquatic Federation's mining techniques would have taken 10 times longer and produced half the results. But she kept her face blank and professional. The prosecutor finished his speech and returned to his seat. The chamber fell silent as the voting began. One by one, species representatives stood to announce their decision. The pattern was clear from the start. The Tau Empire votes to expel, declared a being that looked like a walking tree. The Silicon Collective votes to expel, announced a robot with glowing eyes, the gas giant. Alliance votes to expel, came the translated voice of a creature made entirely of swirling clouds. Sarah counted the votes in her head. Expel, expel, expel. A few species chose to abstain, but not a single one voted in favor of letting humans stay in the galactic community. When the final tally was announced, the numbers were clear. 678 votes to expel humanity from galactic civilization. 169 abstentions. 0 votes in favor. The chamber erupted in satisfied murmurs and clicking sounds that passed for applause among some species. They had finally dealt with the human problem. Sarah stood slowly and straightened her dark blue uniform. Every eye in the chamber watched her. Some aliens expected her to beg. Others thought she might threaten them. A few looked almost sorry for what they had done. "Thank you," Sarah said clearly, "for clarifying where we stand." She paused and looked around the vast chamber one last time. Representatives from 847 different species had just told humanity to leave, to go back to their home system and stay there, to stop being part of the galaxy's greater community. Earth will respond accordingly, she added. With that, Sarah turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber. No one spoke. No one moved. They just watched as the last human representative left their council forever. Behind her, the Zephyrian prosecutor was already talking about the terms of humanity's departure. They had 30 standard days to shut down all operations outside their home system. All human colonies would be abandoned or turned over to other species. All human ships would return to Earth. All human trade agreements would be canceled. Sarah reached the door and stepped into the corridor beyond. Only then did she allow herself a small smile. The aliens thought they had won. They believed they had solved their human problem with a simple vote. They had no idea what they had just done. As Sarah walked through the station's corridors toward her ship, aliens stepped aside to let her pass. Some looked relieved. Others seemed almost guilty. None of them understood what was really happening. The Galactic Council had just voted to exclude humanity from their civilization. They thought this meant humans would quietly go home and stay there. They expected Earth to accept its punishment and learn to behave better. What they didn't realize was that humans had been playing by the galaxy's rules for over 200 years. They had followed the laws, respected the boundaries, and tried to fit in with galactic society. Even when those rules seemed stupid or wasteful, humans had obeyed them. But now the galaxy had made something very clear. Humans weren't welcome in their civilization. The rules that had protected other species no longer applied to Earth. Sarah reached her ship and activated the communication system. Her message would travel faster than light to every human outpost, colony, and settlement in the galaxy. The recall order would be simple and direct. All humans were to return to Earth immediately. To any aliens monitoring the transmission, it would look like humanity was accepting defeat. They would see human ships leaving their posts and heading home. They would think the problem was solved. They wouldn't notice the real message hidden in the recall order. They wouldn't understand that Sarah had just activated a plan that had been decades in the making. They certainly wouldn't realize that humanity had been preparing for this day since the first human diplomat had sat in a Galactic Council meeting and realized how naive the other species really were. As her ship lifted off from the station, Sarah looked back at the massive structure through her viewport. The Galactic Council building was a symbol of cooperation and peace among the stars. It represented thousands of years of civilization and progress. Soon, they would learn what happened when that civilization tried to exclude the species that had been quietly holding it together. Sarah activated her ship's faster-than-light drive and set course for Earth behind her. The aliens were already celebrating their victory. They had no idea that their celebration would be very short-lived. The vote to expel Earth had passed. Now humanity would make their own rules known. In 30 days, the galaxy would understand what it meant to be on the wrong side of human ingenuity. They would learn that excluding humanity from their civilization wasn't a punishment, it was a declaration of war against the very species that had been keeping their society running. The countdown had begun. Earth would respond accordingly, and when they did, the galaxy would never be the same. News of the vote spread across the galaxy faster than starlight. On thousands of worlds and countless space stations, and aboard ships traveling between the stars, humans received the same message. Come home. The recall order was clear and simple. All human personnel were to abandon their posts and return to Earth within 30 standard days. No exceptions, no delays, no questions asked. To the aliens watching, humanity's response seemed almost disappointing. After all their reputation for being stubborn and aggressive, humans were simply packing up and leaving. Ships launched from mining colonies and distant asteroid belts. Research teams abandoned their studies on alien worlds. Diplomatic staff loaded their belongings and headed for home. On Kepler Station, the largest trade hub in the Outer Rim, dock, workers watched human freighters depart one after another. The station's crystalline administrator, Vex 9, actually felt a twinge of regret as he watched them go. They were good workers, he admitted to his assistant. Humans never complained about dangerous jobs. They fixed problems other species couldn't solve. Similar conversations happened across the galaxy. The Aquatic Federation noted that human engineers had solved underwater construction problems that had puzzled their best minds for decades. The Silicon Collective acknowledged that human programmers had written code that was somehow both elegant and efficient. But relief was the dominant feeling among alien leaders. The human problem was finally solved. No more complaints about their aggressive expansion. No more incidents where humans fought back against helpful relocations. No more embarrassing situations where human traders somehow outnegotiated species that had been dealing commercially for millennia. What the aliens didn't see was the scope of what was really happening. They noticed the obvious departures. Colonial transports left settled worlds. Diplomatic vessels departed from capital systems. Research ships abandoned their studies and headed for Earth. But they missed the subtle evacuations that happened at the same time. Marcus Webb had been a mineral consultant on the Zephyrian homeworld for 15 years. His job was supposedly to help improve mining efficiency. What he had really been doing was mapping every military installation, government building, and critical infrastructure point on the planet. When the recall order came, he packed his equipment and left like any other human worker. The Zephyrians were sad to see him go. They had no idea he was taking detailed plans of their entire planetary defense network with him. Dr. Lisa Park had spent 8 years as a research exchange student at the Galactic University on Centauri Prime. She studied alien psychology and social structures. Her thesis on interspecies communication patterns was considered brilliant by her professors. What they didn't know was that she had been building psychological profiles on every major alien leader in the galaxy. When she left, she took with her detailed analyses of how to manipulate, pressure, or negotiate with nearly every important figure in galactic politics. Captain James Morrison had been running tourism charters through the Spiral Arm for 12 years. Alien passengers loved his ships because human pilots could navigate dangerous routes that other species avoided. What his passengers didn't realize was that Morrison had been mapping every hyperspace route, defensive position, and hidden base in 3 sectors. His tourist routes had covered more territory than most military survey missions. These were just 3 humans among thousands who were quietly leaving their posts across the galaxy. Each one took with them knowledge that alien species had never thought to protect. Why would they? Humans were just helpful neighbors who enjoyed learning about other cultures. On Earth, a different kind of preparation was beginning. In the 72 hours following the vote, every human government received the same classified briefing. The presentation was given by Admiral Rebecca Torres, who had just been appointed to head something called the Terran Defense Initiative. Most government leaders had never heard of the organization before. The briefing room in Geneva was packed, with presidents, prime ministers, and representatives from every human nation. The room was secured against all forms of electronic surveillance. What Admiral Torres was about to tell them could not be allowed to reach alien ears. "Ladies and gentlemen," Torres began, "for the past 200 years, humanity has been playing by galactic rules. We've followed their laws, respected their boundaries, and tried to be good galactic citizens. As of 3 days ago, that era has ended." She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. It showed a map of the galaxy, with human positions marked in blue. There were thousands of them. "The Galactic Council believes they have expelled humanity from their civilization," Torres continued. "What they've actually done is release us from the constraints that have limited our potential for 2 centuries. The display changed to show the same map, but now the blue dots were connected by red lines. The pattern that emerged made several world leaders gasp. The lines showed relationships, dependencies, and connections that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. "For 200 years, Torres explained, humanity has been integrating itself into galactic civilization, not as conquerors or invaders, but as the people who make things work. We've been the engineers who fix their broken systems, the programmers who write their software, the traders who find efficient routes, the researchers who solve their problems." She paused to let that sink in. The aliens think they've gotten rid of a troublesome neighbor. What they've actually done is vote to exclude the species that has been quietly running their civilization for them. A new image appeared on the display. This one showed critical infrastructure across the galaxy. Power grids, communication networks, transportation systems, defensive installations. A shocking percentage of them showed human involvement in their design, construction, or maintenance. "They wanted us gone," Torres said with a slight smile. "So we're going to give them exactly what they asked for. We're going to take our people home, and we're going to take our contributions with us." The plan she outlined was breathtaking in its scope and patience. For decades, humans had been preparing for the possibility that galactic civilization might turn against them. Every human who worked on alien systems had left behind hidden access codes. Every piece of human-designed technology contained concealed override protocols. Every human-written program had secret backdoors that only Earth knew about. "The galaxy runs on human innovation," Torres concluded. "They just don't know it yet. In 27 days, when the last human ship crosses into the Sol system, they're going to find out what their civilization looks like without us." She looked around the room at the stunned faces of Earth's leaders. It's time to educate them. The recall continued. Human ships streamed toward Earth from every corner of the galaxy. To alien observers, it looked like a defeated species going home with their tails between their legs. They had no idea they were watching the strategic withdrawal of the galaxy's most important infrastructure specialists. In a few weeks, when the last human technician left the last alien facility, galactic civilization would discover just how dependent they had become on human expertise. The countdown had begun. 27 days until the galaxy learned what it meant to expel humanity from their civilization. 27 days until they discovered who had really been in charge all along. The 30-day deadline passed quietly. Earth's last diplomatic vessel, the Ambassador Chen's own ship, crossed into the Sol system at exactly 23:59 Galactic Standard Time. The galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. The human problem was finally solved. Trade routes that humans had maintained were quickly divided among other species. The Tau Empire took over 3 major shipping lanes in the Outer Rim. The Silicon Collective absorbed the mineral extraction operations in the asteroid belt sectors. Colonies that humans had protected were split up among neighboring civilizations who promised to manage them properly. The Galactic Council even passed a resolution declaring the human crisis officially resolved. Representatives congratulated themselves on handling the situation with such diplomatic skill. They had removed a disruptive element from their civilization without firing a single shot. For exactly 6 days, everything seemed perfect. Then the hyperspace relay network started going dark. It began with border systems, remote outposts that suddenly lost communication with Galactic Central Command. The first few failures were dismissed as routine maintenance issues. Equipment broke down sometimes. Pirates occasionally damaged relay stations. These things happened. But the failures continued, and they followed a pattern that nobody understood at first. Commander Vex 9 was reviewing shipping schedules on Kepler Station when his communication officer reported the problem. "Sir, we've lost contact with relay stations in sectors 7, 15, and 23, the officer announced. Vex 9's crystalline features reflected his confusion. "What do those sectors have in common?" "Unknown, sir. They're not close to each other. Different species control them. No recent pirate activity reported in any of those areas." By the end of the second day, 12 relay stations had gone offline. By the end of the week, the number had reached 47. The failures spread across the galaxy like a disease, but they didn't follow any logical pattern based on geography or politics. Then someone at Galactic Council headquarters made a terrifying discovery. Analyst Cree 7 was a Zephyrian who specialized in infrastructure management. She had been tasked with finding the common factor in the relay failures. After days of analysis, she found it. Every failing relay station was one that humans had helped design, build, or maintain. The realization hit the galactic community like a tsunami. For over 2 centuries, humans had been involved in communications infrastructure across the galaxy. They had claimed to be sharing their expertise to help improve efficiency and reliability. Their quantum entanglement communicators were 40% more efficient than previous models. Their signal boosters could reach distances that other species thought impossible. Now those same systems were shutting down, but the communication failures were just the beginning. On Zephyr Prime, the homeworld of the species that had led the vote to expel humanity, atmospheric processors began malfunctioning. These machines were critical to maintaining breathable air in the planet's underground cities. Without them, billions of Zephyrians would suffocate within days. Emergency repair teams rushed to fix the processors, only to discover a horrifying truth. The core systems had been designed by human engineers during a cultural exchange program 30 years earlier. The processors used human-designed algorithms that were supposedly more efficient than traditional Zephyrian technology. They were more efficient. They were also completely dependent on control codes that only humans possessed. Dr. Zeth Prime, the planet's chief atmospheric engineer, stared at the processor's interface in growing panic. The human-designed systems were elegant and beautiful. They had worked flawlessly for 3 decades, but now they displayed a simple message that made his blood freeze. Access denied. Please contact System Administrator. The System Administrator had been Dr. Linda Hayes, a human engineer who had left Zephyr Prime 18 days earlier. Similar disasters began cascading across the galaxy. The Stellar Banking Consortium's credit network crashed when security protocols written by human consultants simply stopped working. The Aquatic Federation's underwater cities lost their current. Regulators, systems that had been upgraded by helpful human technicians decades earlier. What made it worse was the realization of how subtle the human involvement had been. These weren't obvious takeovers or aggressive infiltrations. They were improvements offered in friendship, upgrades provided during cultural exchanges, solutions suggested by helpful human experts who just wanted to make things work better. And they had made things work better. For decades, human innovations had improved efficiency, reduced costs, and solved problems that had puzzled alien engineers for generations. The galaxy had become dependent on human expertise without even realizing it was happening. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council were called, but even these were hampered by the communication breakdowns. When representatives finally managed to gather, they found a message waiting for them. The main screen in the council chamber activated on its own. The image that appeared was crystal clear, despite the fact that it was somehow bypassing all of their security protocols. Admiral Rebecca Torres sat behind a simple desk. Her expression was calm and professional. Behind her, the blue and green sphere of Earth was visible through a viewport. "Greetings," she said simply. "I am Admiral Torres of the Terran Defense Initiative. I'm sure you're wondering why your systems are experiencing some difficulties." Angry murmurs filled the chamber. The Zephyrian prosecutor who had led the case against humanity rose from his seat. "This is an act of war," he declared. "You are deliberately sabotaging galactic infrastructure." Torres smiled slightly. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. We're not sabotaging anything. We're simply taking our contributions with us, exactly as you requested." She activated a display that showed system failures across the galaxy. The pattern was now obvious. Every failing system was one that humans had worked on. For 200 years, Torres continued, humanity tried to be good galactic citizens. We shared our knowledge. We solved your problems. We made your lives easier and more efficient. We did this because we believed in galactic civilization. Her expression hardened slightly. 6 weeks ago, you voted us out of that civilization. You told us we weren't welcome. You ordered us to leave and never come back, so we're giving you exactly what you asked for. The chamber erupted in shouting. Species representatives demanded that the humans fix their systems immediately. They accused Earth of terrorism, extortion, and violations of galactic law. Torres waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "You have 72 hours to reconsider your position," she said calmly. "We're willing to discuss terms for humanity's full reinstatement into galactic civilization. Until then, you'll have to manage your infrastructure without human assistance." The transmission ended. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were facing a choice: swallow their pride and reinstate the species they had just expelled, or watch their technological civilization collapse. On his homeworld, Dr. Zeth Prime watched atmospheric readings drop steadily. His people had maybe 2 days of breathable air left. The human-designed processors sat silent and unresponsive, waiting for access codes that only Earth possessed. Across the galaxy, similar countdowns were beginning. The species that had voted to expel humanity were about to learn exactly how dependent they had become on human expertise. The education was just beginning. The 72-hour deadline approached like a storm front. Across the galaxy, critical systems continued to fail with mechanical precision. What had started as isolated problems was now a cascade of breakdowns that threatened the foundation of galactic civilization. On Zephyr Prime, atmospheric readings had dropped to critical levels. Dr. Zeth Prime and his team worked frantically to bypass the human-designed processors, but every attempt failed. The systems were too integrated, too sophisticated, and too dependent on access codes that only Earth possessed. "Can't we just shut them down and use the old systems?" asked his assistant, a young engineer whose name translated roughly to bright metal. "The old systems were removed 30 years ago." Zeth Prime replied grimly. "The humans convinced us their processors were so much better that we didn't need backup systems." They were right. The human systems are incredibly efficient. They're also completely locked. Similar conversations were happening throughout the galaxy. The crystalline hegemony discovered that their entire mining operation on the Kepler belt depended on human-designed extraction algorithms. The algorithms were brilliant. They increased yield by 300% while reducing equipment wear. But now they simply wouldn't respond to commands. The Aquatic Federation faced an even worse crisis. Their underwater cities relied on current regulators that managed water flow through massive urban complexes. The human-upgraded systems had been working perfectly for decades, automatically adjusting for tides, storms, and seasonal changes. Now those systems were locked down, and natural ocean currents were already threatening to flood populated areas. But the real panic began when species started discovering the scope of human involvement in their civilization. Analysis teams across the galaxy were frantically reviewing their infrastructure, trying to determine what was human-designed and what was safe. The results were terrifying. Humans hadn't just helped with a few systems here and there. They had been involved in virtually every aspect of galactic technology. The hyperspace navigation computers that allowed faster-than-light travel, upgraded with human algorithms that improved efficiency by 60%. The power distribution networks that supplied energy to entire planets, optimized by human engineers who found ways to reduce waste and increase output. The medical equipment in hospitals, enhanced with human software that improved diagnostic accuracy and treatment success rates. Worse yet, the humans had been subtle about their involvement. They never took credit for major innovations. They presented their contributions as small improvements, helpful suggestions, or collaborative efforts. They worked alongside alien engineers, sharing knowledge and building relationships. They had integrated themselves so thoroughly into galactic civilization that removing them was like trying to remove the nervous system from a living body. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions, but their discussions were hampered by communication breakdowns. When they could connect, the debates were fierce and desperate. "We cannot bow to human extortion," declared Prosecutor Czar 9, the Zephyrian who had led the case against humanity. "If we give in to their demands, we set a precedent that any species can hold galactic civilization hostage." "Easy for you to say," snapped Representative Coral Song of the Aquatic Federation. "Your people aren't facing floods that could kill millions. My cities have maybe 48 hours before the current regulators fail completely." "The humans are bluffing," insisted Crystal Mind of the Crystalline Hegemony. "They wouldn't actually let galactic civilization collapse. They live in this galaxy too. They depend on our trade, our resources, our cooperation." But Admiral Torres's next transmission proved that Crystal Mind was very wrong. The message came through on every active communication channel simultaneously. Somehow, human technology was bypassing every security protocol, every firewall, every protective system in the galaxy. The transmission appeared on government screens, commercial networks, and personal communication devices. Torres appeared again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her sat a panel of humans wearing uniforms that most aliens had never seen before. The insignia on their shoulders showed ranks and organizations that officially didn't exist. "I hope you've been reviewing your infrastructure," Torres began without preamble. "By now you should understand the extent of humanity's contributions to your civilization." She activated a display that showed a galaxy-wide map. Red indicators marked failing systems. Yellow showed systems at risk. Green indicated infrastructure that was still functioning but vulnerable. The amount of red and yellow was staggering. "You seem to think we're bluffing," Torres continued. "You believe we won't allow galactic civilization to collapse because we depend on it too. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of humanity's position." The display changed to show resource flows, trade routes, and economic dependencies. But instead of showing human dependence on alien resources, it revealed the opposite. The galaxy was economically dependent on human efficiency, human innovations, and human solutions to problems that other species couldn't solve. "For 200 years, Torres explained, humanity has been propping up your civilization. We've been solving your problems, improving your technology, and making your lives easier. We did this because we believed in cooperation and mutual benefit." Her expression hardened. "But you've made it clear that cooperation is no longer possible. You voted us out of your civilization. You told us to leave and never come back. So we're going to show you what your civilization looks like without human support." One of the officers behind Torres leaned forward. "My name is Director Sarah Park, Head of Galactic Intelligence Operations. For the past 50 years, my department has been monitoring threats to galactic stability. What we've learned might interest you." The display changed again, this time showing detailed intelligence reports. military capabilities of every major species, economic weaknesses that could be exploited, political tensions that could be inflamed, social divisions that could be widened. Did you know, Director Park asked conversationally, that the Tau Empire has been secretly violating the Mining Rights Treaty for 30 years? Or that the Silicon Collective has been conducting illegal experiments on sentient AI? Or that 3 members of the Zephyrian High Council are taking bribes from criminal organizations? The chamber erupted in angry denials and accusations. Representatives shouted at each other as decades of hidden secrets were suddenly exposed. Torres waited for the chaos to die down before continuing. Humanity has been watching, learning and recording for 2 centuries. We know where your military bases are hidden. We know the vulnerabilities in your defense systems. We know which of your leaders can be trusted and which ones are corrupt. We know the economic pressure points that could collapse your trade networks. We know the social tensions that could tear your societies apart. She leaned forward slightly. You thought you were expelling a primitive, aggressive species that didn't understand galactic civilization. What you actually did was declare war on the galaxy's most sophisticated intelligence operation. The final part of the presentation was the most devastating. Torres revealed that humanity had detailed files on every major alien leader, complete psychological profiles, and strategies for negotiating with, manipulating, or pressuring each one. They knew personal secrets, political weaknesses, and hidden agendas that could destroy careers and topple governments. You have a choice, Torres concluded. You can continue to treat humanity as an enemy and watch your civilization slowly collapse. Or you can recognize that we've been partners all along, whether you knew it or not. The deadline was extended to 1 week, but the terms had changed. Humanity was no longer asking to be reinstated into galactic civilization. They were demanding recognition as one of its founding pillars. The vote that had seemed like such a victory was now revealed as the biggest strategic mistake in galactic history. The species that had expelled humanity were about to learn that some neighbors are too dangerous to make into enemies. The education was entering its final phase. The final phase of humanity's education program was both elegant and devastating. Instead of destroying galactic civilization, humans demonstrated complete mastery over it. On the 4th day after Torres' intelligence revelation, something unprecedented happened. Every system that had been failing suddenly came back online. Atmospheric processors on Zephyr Prime resumed normal operation. Hyperspace relay stations began transmitting again. The Aquatic Federation's current regulators reactivated just hours before catastrophic flooding would have begun. But the systems didn't just restart. They began operating at levels of efficiency that no one had seen before. Dr. Zeth Prime stared at his atmospheric readings in amazement. Not only were the processors working again, they were producing cleaner air than ever before. Oxygen levels were optimized to the exact preferences of Zephyrian physiology. Trace gases that had been minor irritants for decades were now completely filtered out. How is this possible? Asked Bright Metal, his assistant. The humans aren't just turning our systems back on, Zeth Prime realized. They're showing us what these systems were always capable of. Across the galaxy, similar revelations were occurring. Hyperspace routes that had taken days to calculate were now solved in hours. Navigation computers provided course corrections that reduced travel time by 30%, while improving safety ratings. Mining operations that had been efficient were now approaching theoretical maximum yields. The message was clear. Humanity hadn't just been helping galactic civilization function. They had been deliberately limiting their own contributions to avoid alarming other species. Admiral Torres' final transmission came exactly 1 week after her deadline. This time she appeared alone, sitting in what was clearly a command center on Earth. Behind her, massive displays showed real-time data from across the galaxy, infrastructure status, economic flows, and security monitoring that covered every major system in known space. By now, Torres began, you understand the situation. For 200 years, humanity has been an integral part of galactic civilization. We haven't been trying to join your community. We haven't been asking for permission to participate. We've been quietly managing the systems that keep your societies functioning. She gestured to the displays behind her. What you see here is the Galactic Infrastructure Command Center. It's been operational for 150 years. From this facility, human technicians monitor power grids, communication networks, transportation systems, and defensive installations across 800 inhabited worlds. The implications were staggering. Every species in the galaxy believed they were managing their own critical infrastructure. In reality, human oversight had been keeping their systems running smoothly for over a century. We've been preventing system failures, optimizing resource distribution, and coordinating emergency responses throughout the galaxy, Torres continued. We've stopped wars by ensuring that aggressive species couldn't access certain weapon systems. We've prevented famines by redirecting food shipments before shortages became critical. We've contained disease outbreaks by activating quarantine protocols before local governments even knew they had a problem. Torres activated a historical display that showed prevented disasters over the past century. The list was enormous. Economic collapses that had been averted through subtle market adjustments. Natural disasters where human-coordinated response systems had saved millions of lives. Political crises that had been diffused through careful information management. The galaxy has been more peaceful, more prosperous, and more stable than at any time in recorded history, Torres noted. This didn't happen by accident. It happened because humanity has been quietly managing the complex systems that keep civilization functioning. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Torres brought up a galactic map that showed the true scope of human involvement, not just the obvious contributions like technology and engineering, but the subtle influences that had shaped galactic culture itself. Did you wonder why galactic law developed such strong protections for individual rights over the past 2 centuries? Torres asked. Those legal frameworks were suggested by human legal scholars during cultural exchange programs. Did you notice that interspecies conflicts have become less common over time? Human mediators and negotiators have been working behind the scenes to resolve disputes before they escalate to violence. Even galactic art, literature, and entertainment had been influenced by human cultural exports. Music that aliens thought was purely their own creation often incorporated harmonies and rhythms that humans had introduced during artistic collaborations. Scientific advances that alien researchers had made often built on mathematical concepts that human academics had shared during university exchanges. The galaxy hadn't just become dependent on human technology. Human ideas, values, and perspectives had become woven into the fabric of galactic civilization. You voted to expel us from your civilization, Torres said simply. But you can't expel us from something we helped create. For 2 centuries, humanity has been shaping galactic culture, law, technology, and society. We didn't take over your civilization. We helped you build a better one. The final ultimatum was delivered with quiet confidence. The Galactic Council will vote again, Torres announced. This time you're not deciding whether to expel humanity. You're deciding whether to officially recognize what has been true for 200 years. Humanity is not a member of galactic civilization. We are one of its founders. The terms were non-negotiable. Full reinstatement of humanity with recognition as a founding civilization, permanent representation on the Galactic Council, with authority over infrastructure and security matters, and acknowledgement that human expertise would continue to be essential for galactic stability. You have 48 hours, Torres concluded. After that, we'll assume you prefer to manage your own affairs without human assistance. The vote was scheduled for the following day, but the outcome was already decided. Species representatives who had proudly voted to expel humanity just weeks earlier now faced the reality of their situation. On Zephyr Prime, Prosecutor Czar 9 met with his planetary council. The irony wasn't lost on him that their council chamber's environmental systems were now working better than ever before, thanks to human oversight. We have no choice, he admitted to his colleagues. If we vote against humanity again, our atmospheric processors will fail. Our people will die, and even if we somehow survive that crisis, we'll be completely dependent on human goodwill for everything from communications to food distribution. Similar meetings were taking place across the galaxy. Pride warred with survival, but survival won. The final vote was unanimous. 847 votes in favor of recognizing humanity as a founding civilization of the galaxy. 0 votes against. 0 abstentions. Ambassador Sarah Chen returned to the Galactic Council, but this time she didn't sit in the defendant's chair. A new seat had been created at the center of the chamber, the chair of the Galactic Infrastructure Authority. The position would be permanently held by a human, Representative Chen's closing remarks were delivered with the same calm dignity she had shown during the expulsion vote. "Thank you for helping us clarify the rules," she said. "We look forward to continuing our educational relationship." As alien representatives filed out of the chamber, many realized they had fundamentally misunderstood humanity from the beginning. They had seen humans as aggressive, primitive, and reckless. What they had failed to recognize was that these traits, combined with human intelligence and patience, didn't make humanity dangerous. It made them inevitable. The species that had voted to expel Earth had learned a valuable lesson about the nature of power. True authority didn't come from military might or political maneuvering. It came from being indispensable. Humanity had spent 2 centuries making themselves indispensable to galactic civilization. The vote to expel them had simply forced the galaxy to acknowledge what had been true all along. Earth had never needed permission to be part of galactic civilization. They had been running it from the beginning. The education was complete.